Welcome back, everyone. Mark Price here at devslopes.com, in case you forgot. So, what do we got going on here? We've got a server running, a node server more or less, and we also have our database, our Mongo server running for our databases, which of course that Mongo server can host multiple databases, which is great. And we've just set up a connection to it here in this line of code right here. Now, to work with Mongo, or in Mongoose and Mongo, we need to create models. Now, I did tell you that MongoDB is a NoSQL database, which it is, but we are going to give it a little bit of structure. Mongoose helps us create the scaffolding we need to have consistent data inserted into our database. And so Mongoose is an open source library, thankfully, that we have with Node. Other languages and platforms have their own implementation. So if you wanted to work with MongoDB, but you were using Python for the front end, there's a Python wrapper with a different name, and it's not Mongoose, but made by somebody else. And there's lots of different wrappers like that. Not wrappers like Exhibit or Run DMC, but like WRAPPR wrappers. It wraps around the implementation and helps make your life a little bit easier. So we call them frameworks or wrappers or anything in between. So that's what Mongoose is here. And what we need to do is create models, basically, that define the data that we're going to store in there. And what's really cool is it's just JavaScript and like JSON. And so you've worked with this kind of stuff before if you know JavaScript, which is really awesome. So what we're going to do is create a new folder, and we're going to call this model. Makes sense? And models where we're going to store all of those models or the definitions of the data. And so let's think about our app for a second here. We're creating a storefront, more or less, or just an app that can have a series of products and a wish list. So you may think of it similar to Amazon. So we should be able to create a new wish list. We should be able to create a new product. Now, when you're on Amazon, a customer is not typically creating a new product. I mean, if you're a seller, though, like an Amazon seller, you could create a new product. So that would be a use case. But more or less, the products are probably being created by the company that owns them or that's running the website. But we still need that. We need the ability to take an existing product and add it onto a wish list, and as well as get a list of wish lists and a list of products. So there's a few things we need to do. And so the first thing we should probably do is create the product, because you can't have a wish list unless you have products to put in it. So when you're working with data, you always want to drill down to the lowest level. What depends on what depends on what depends on what, and you go down to the bottom, the most bottom level, and that's the data that you create first, because it's needed from there and on up. So in the model folder, we're going to do a new file, and we're going to call this product.js. Okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to import Mongoose again, because we need to use it. Okay? You have to import in every file. It doesn't carry over unless you write some code to make it carry over. So that's why we're importing it again. Meaning just because server.js is our starting file doesn't mean every other file that we use is going to be able to have access to that. Okay, so there's our Mongoose. And we need another one here called Schema. And just like I was telling you, we need to define our data. And a schema, think of a schema as like the plans for or blueprints for a house that's being built. And I mean, the word, it means what it means, but you're kind of putting the scheme behind your data together so it can be consistent. So we're going to say var product equals new schema. Okay. Now keep in mind, if we hadn't stored this in a variable here, we would not have been able to call new on it. So this is actually grabbing information from Mongoose. It's grabbing a schema object, and we're creating a new object using the constructor syntax, okay? The JavaScript constructor syntax. And this is where you define your data. So if we have a product, it probably has a title. And we're going to give it a type. So this title is a string. And then a price, which is a number. And maybe how many likes it has. So you're on a website, 10,000 people have liked this, okay? So likes. And that's a number as well. It's really that simple, okay? You would have just done a lot more work if you're working with SQL to set up your tables, okay? And then what we want to do is we want to export this. Model, and I'll explain this here. So Module.exports, of course, this is a Node thing. It allows you to export something for your file that another file can import. And what we're exporting is a keyword here, or a mongoose model, which is a reserved function, where you pass in the name of the model itself. So this is what's actually going to be stored in the database. Product with a capital P, okay? When we put this, whatever you write here is going to go into Mongo, okay, in the actual database. And so, and then when you do a query, like let's say you went into the shell, you would do db.products with an S under all lowercase .find. Okay, so what you put here is the name of the model, and when you do an actual queries and things in the database, you would do products with an S. Okay, remember we talked about that. So product, and then we pass in the schema. So what represents it? This is what represents our product. So what it means is whenever we create a new product model, it's only going to have this data, okay? And if we added something else to it, let's say I was creating a new product and I added a fourth property somewhere else, it wouldn't actually save. Only these three would save because that's what we specified here. So if it's not here in the schema, it will not be saved. Very important to know. Okay, so what we've done here using Mongoose is we've taken Mongo and we've protected our data a little bit better. We're saying, okay, don't just let anybody throw anything into Mongo. Let's actually put some rules behind it. And so that's why you should use Mongoose and don't interact directly with the database. So this is looking really good. You're probably like, well, how do I even use this? It doesn't make sense. And we're going to get to that in just a moment. But let's go and create our second model. So here in the model, let's do a new file, and we're going to do wishlist.js. Okay, and we're going to have some similar things. So we can copy and paste these two, like so. And there's one more we're going to need, and we'll explain it as we use it. So it's called object ID mongoose.schema.types.object ID. Now, there's something that's really important for you to know. When I'm doing things like this and like this with capital letters, it's because that's what I'm choosing to do as a developer. Okay, you can name these whatever you want because these are variables. So if you're new to JavaScript, just know that I'm naming these here. But what I'm not naming are these. mongoose.schema.types.object ID. These all have to be spelled exactly with the capital letters as you see here, or it will not be able to find them. Very important. So we're grabbing a reference type here called object ID, or it's the automatic ID of the documents, and we'll explain how we're going to use that here in a second. So let's create our wish list. So var wishlist equals new schema. We've done that before. And wish list should probably have a title. And we're going to do something different this time. Rather than just saying like it's a string, we can actually add multiple options to this. So we can say the type is string. Now, if I didn't have the curly braces, type is the default setting. That's why we had string there before. But we're going to do something more now. We're going to add a default on here. We're going to call this cool wish list. So here's the idea. If, let's say, a person creates a new wish list, but they don't give it a name, well, then what will happen is it'll give it one automatically with this default keyword, okay? So again, what we're doing is just adding some options. I could have just said string, which is the type, but when you have one or more options, then you have to say it's of type string and then your other properties that you want. Another one that's often used is required, and you could say true or false, meaning it will not save to the database unless you have that filled in there. But that's okay. We don't need that. We have the default on there, so that's fine. And now wish list should have a list of products, right? But we don't want to just copy. What we don't want to do is insert a bunch of products into the database and then insert a bunch of products into our wish list. Okay? We don't want duplicate data, right? That doesn't make sense. So what we want to do is want to make relationships. We want to make connections between the data. And let's do that now. So products, it's going to be an array. So there's obviously the array syntax. And inside the array, we're going to say it's an object ID, okay, is the type. And we're going to refer to a specific collection. And we're going to say product. Okay? So what we're saying here is, as far as products go, it's of type object ID, meaning it has to be a Mongo object that's already in the database. That's what it has to be that we're putting in here. An ID, okay? And it's referencing the type of schema. And in this case, the collection type is a product. And the way you spell this is very important, very, very important. It has to be spelled exactly the same way as you defined it in the database. If it's not, if you did a lowercase p or something else, it's not going to be able to find the collection, and you're going to be like, what's going on with my data? Okay, so this is very important that we're defining that, saying, hey, this is a reference, okay? We're referring to another collection, versus what I'm trying to tell you is we didn't just grab this data here, okay? I could have just taken that, and here in the wish list, I could have just pasted this in here like that and said, okay, this is what we're doing. And this works, actually. You could do this. But what this means is when I create the other document, it has no relationship to this, and so we'd be inserting double data. We'd be inserting data here, then data in our products collection, which is silly. That's not good database design. In fact, it would cause many bugs. So we want to refer to data. This is called a relationship. And what you could do is, if you want to learn more about relationships, just go to loveandrelationships.com. I'm just kidding. If you want to learn more about database relationships, especially with Mongo, just search Google for Mongo relationships, and you'll get a whole bunch of information there. We're just creating a reference, okay, a relationship to products here. So it's an array of products. Makes sense. And we're not going to say it's required or anything else because nothing may have been added to it yet. So and let's go ahead and export this. Module.exports equals mongoose.model. Okay, and we're going to call this wish list. Again, that name's really important, okay? Whatever you name it here is how it's going to be in your database. And then we're going to pass in this JavaScript object, this schema here, okay? So all we've done here is created two blueprints, one for a product and one for a wish list, okay? And one more thing that I want to do is actually just import these into our server.js up here to make sure that we didn't write any bad syntax, make sure it's all working. Right now, if I ran it, okay, it probably wouldn't give us any errors because it's not being used. Right now, the code is just sitting there. So let's actually bring it in so it can be used. So what we're going to do is we're going to say var product equals require, okay, / and it's in the model folder. And we're going to say product, okay. So we just imported the product, and var wish list equals require / model / wish list. And you don't need the .js extension, of course, and the / means it's not a node. It's not going to be in the node modules folder. It's going to be here in our local file system. And of course, when I say require, it's because down here we're exporting it. So what we're exporting is a mongoose model called product. Okay, this is what we're exporting. And so that's what's actually being imported over here. Okay, so we're just taking it from one place and requiring it in another. So now what I want to do is go to my terminal, and let's go ahead and run our server again. Or, well, let's see what's going on. I think I'm in the wrong window here. Okay, it looks like it's still running, and with no problems actually. Yeah, this looks good to me. Let me make sure I'm in the right directory. Just we didn't get any errors. Usually there's always one or two errors, and I can't believe we did it perfectly the first time through. Users, swag shop, yeah, we did it. We did it, ladies and gentlemen. We did it without any errors. So we've covered a lot here. It's not really functional yet. We haven't used it yet, but what you've learned so far is to create models. This is your scaffolding or your blueprints for your collections. So we're not inserting junk into the database. We started at the lowest level, which is a product, because the wish list depends upon products. We defined its schema. We gave it a title, a price, and likes, and then we exported that using, we named it right here, and then this is the schema. And then in the wish list, okay, we said, hey, we want to have a list of products. So it's of type object ID. We don't want to store the whole thing, right? We don't want to store the name, the title, all that stuff of each product because it's already stored in the database. So just store the ID of it, and then we can fetch it later whenever we need it. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. You don't want to nest data here and then also have it somewhere else. That's duplicate data. And then we're, of course, referring to that exact name. And then we've give this a name, and we export it. And all we did was we imported these two schemas, or these models, so we can start using them. And so let's call this video done. We've learned a lot. Make sure your app is up to running to where we are at this point, and let's move on and forward. Mark Price at devslopes.com.